So today's reading selection is Neil Gaiman's short story, The Truth is a Cave in the Black Mountains. Neil Gaiman is a pretty famous writer. He's contemporary, he's still alive. I think he's living up in Detroit, Michigan, in the United States, but he's actually a British guy. And he's written a bunch of stuff that's become really, really famous. And like they've made it into shows on Amazon Prime and shows on Netflix and stuff like that, stars. He's really, really famous for the book American Gods, and that I think is a series on Stars. And he's also really famous for the book Good Omens. That's the series on Amazon Prime. And he writes a lot of short stories, and he likes to go around and read the things that he's written. And so, like, he does a lot of podcasts and stuff like that. The through line of all of Neil Gaiman's writing is that he writes about human nature, but he does it by writing about human nature through the lens of a magical world. He writes about worlds in which magic is commonplace and magic is able to strip away the falsehoods about how people present themselves, and you can see them for how they really are. And The Truth is a Cave in the Black Mountains is no exception to that. It's sort of set in a world where magic is commonplace. It's set in Scotland. And imagine it's like Scotland about 300 years ago, but with magic. So it's kind of like not entirely realistic, but there are elements of realism. So keep that setting in mind as you read the story with me. Also, as you read the story, I want you to be paying attention to the theme. Think about what moral or lesson you are supposed to learn as a result of reading this story. That's what I'm going to ask you about when you go to write. All right, so here we go. This is a little bit longer piece. A Truth is a Cave in the Black Mountains. You ask me if I can forgive myself? I can forgive myself many things. For where I left him, for what I did, but I will not forgive myself for the year that I hated my daughter, when I believed her to have run away, perhaps to the city. During that year I forbade her name to be mentioned, and if her name entered my prayers when I prayed, it was to ask that she would one day learn the meaning of what she had done, of the dishonor she had brought to my family, of the red that ringed her mother's eyes. I hate myself for that, and nothing will ease that, not even what happened that night on the side of the mountain. I had searched for nearly 10 years, although the trail was cold. If you would say that I found him by accident, but I do not believe in accidents. If you walk the path eventually, you must arrive at the cave. But that was later. First, there was the valley on the mainland, the whitewashed house in the gentle meadow with the burn splashing through it, a house that sat like a square of white sky against the green of the grass and the heather just beginning to purple. And there was a boy outside the house, picking wool off of a thorn bush. He did not see me approaching, and he did not look up until I said, I used to do that, gather the wool from the thorn bushes and twigs. My mother would wash it, and then she would make me things with it, a ball and a doll. He turned. He looked shocked, as if I had appeared out of nowhere, and I had not. I had walked many a mile, and many more miles to go. I said, I walk quietly. Is this the house of Calum McGuinness? The boy nodded, drew himself up to his full height, which was perhaps 2 fingers bigger than mine, and he said, I am Calum McGuinness. Is there another of that name? For the Calum McGuinness I seek is a grown man. The boy said nothing, just unknotted a thick clump of sheep's wool from the clutching fingers of the thorn bush. I said, Your father, perhaps? Would he be Calum McGuinness as well? The boy was peering at me. What are you? He asked. I am a small man, I told him, but I am a man nonetheless, and I am here to see Calum McGuinness. Why? The boy hesitated. Then, why are you so small? I said, Because I have something to ask your father, man's business. And I saw a smile start at the tips of his lips. It's not a bad thing to be small, young Calum. There was a night when the Campbells came knocking on my door, a whole troop of them, 12 men with knives and sticks, and they demanded of my wife Morag that she produce me, as they were there to kill me, in revenge for some imagined slight. And she said, Young Johnny, run down to the far meadow and tell your father to come back to the house, that I sent for him. And the Campbells watched as the boy ran out the door. They knew that I was a most dangerous person, but nobody had told them that I was a wee man, or that had been told them had not been believed. Did the boy call you? Said the lad. It was no boy, I told him, but me myself it was. And they'd had me, and I still walked out the door and threw their fingers. The boy laughed, and then he said, "Why were the Campbells after you?" It was a disagreement about the ownership of the cattle. They thought the cows were theirs. I maintained the Campbells' ownership of them had ended the first night the cows had come with me over the hills. "Wait here," said young Calum McGuinness. I sat by the burn and looked up at the house. It was a good-sized house. I would have taken it for the house of a doctor or a man of law, not of a border reaver. There were pebbles on the ground, and I made a pile of them, and I tossed the pebbles one by one into the burn. I have a good eye, and I enjoyed rattling the pebbles over the meadow and into the water. I had thrown 100 stones when the boy returned, accompanied by a tall, loping man. His hair was streaked with gray, his face was long and wolfish. There are no wolves in those hills, not any longer, and the bears have gone too. "Good day to you," I said. He said nothing in return, only stared. I'm used to stares. I said, "I'm seeking Calum McGuinness. If you are he, say so. I will greet you. If you are not he, tell me now, and I'll be on my way." "What business would you have with Calum McGuinness?" "I wish to hire him as a guide." "And where is it you wish to be taken?" I stared at him. "That is hard to say," I told him, "for there are some who say it does not exist. There is a certain cave on the misty isle." He said nothing. Then he said, "Calum, go back to the house." "But Da! Tell your mother I said she was to give you some tablet. You like that. Go on." The expressions crossed the boy's face. Puzzlement, hunger, happiness. And then he turned and ran back to the White House. Calum McGuinness said, "Who sent you here?" I pointed to the burn as it splashed its way between us on its journey down the hill. "What's that?" I asked. "Water," he replied. "And they say there is a king across it," I told him. I did not know him then at all, and never knew him well, but the eyes became guarded and his head cocked to one side. How do I know you are who you say you are?" "I have claimed nothing," I said, "just that there are those who have heard that there is a cave on the misty isle, and that you might know the way." He said, "I will not tell you where the cave is. I am not here asking for directions. I seek a guide, and two travel more safely than one." He looked me up and down, and I waited for the joke about my size, but he did not make it, and for that I was grateful. He just said, "When we reach the cave, I will not go inside. You must bring out the gold yourself." I said, "It is all one to me." He said, "You can take only what you carry. I will not touch it, but yes, I will take you." I said, "You will be paid well for your trouble." I reached into my jerkin, handed him the pouch I had in there. "This is for taking me, another twice the size when we return." He poured the coins from the pouch into his huge hand, and he nodded. "Silver," he said. "Good. Then I will say goodbye to my wife and son." "Is there nothing you need to bring?" He said, "I was a reaver in my youth, and reavers travel light. I'll bring a rope for the mountains." He patted his dirk, which hung from his belt, and went back into the whitewashed house. I never saw his wife, not then, nor at any other time. I do not know what color her hair was. I threw another 50 stones into the burn as I waited until he returned, with a coil of rope thrown over one shoulder, and then we walked together, away from the house too grand for any reaver, and we headed west. The mountains between the rest of the world and the coast are gradual hills, visible from a distance as gentle, purple, hazy things like clouds. They seem inviting. They are slow mountains, the kind you can walk up easily, like walking up a hill, but they are hills that take a full day and more to climb. We walked up the hill, and by the end of the first day we were cold. I saw snow on the peaks above us, although it was high summer. We said nothing to each other that first day. There was nothing to be said. We knew where we were going. We made a fire from dried-up sheep dung and a dead thorn bush. We boiled water and made our porridge, each of us throwing a handful of oats and a finger-pinch of salt into the little pan I carried. His handful was huge, and my handful was small, like my hands, which made him smile and say, "I hope you will not be eating half of the porridge." I said I would not, and indeed I did not, for my appetite is smaller than that of a full-grown man. But this is a good thing, I believe, for I can keep going in the wild on nuts and berries that would not keep a bigger person from starving. A path of sorts ran across the high hills, and we followed it and encountered almost nobody. A tinker and his donkey, piled high with old pots, and a girl leading the donkey who smiled at me when she thought me to be a child, and then scowled when she perceived me to be what I am, and would have thrown a stone at me had the tinker not slapped her hand with the switch he had been using to encourage the donkey. And later we overtook an old woman and a man she said was her grandson on their way back across the hills. We ate with her, and she told us that she had attended the birth of her first great-grandchild, that it was a good birth. She said she would tell our fortunes from the lines in our palms if we had coins to cross her palm. I gave the old biddy a clipped lowland groat, and she looked at my palm. She said, "I see death in your past and death in your future." "Death waits in all our futures," I said. She paused. There was the highest of the high lands, where the summer winds have winter on their breath, where they howl and whip and slash the air like knives. She said, "There was a woman in a tree. There will be a man in a tree." I said, "Will this mean anything to me?" "One day, perhaps," she said. "Beware of gold. Silver is your friend." And then she was done with me. To Calum McGuinness, she said, "Your palm has been burned." He said that was true. She said, "Give me your other hand, your left hand." He did so. She gazed at it intently, then, "You return to where you began. You will be higher than most other men, and there is no grave waiting for you where you are going." He said, "You tell me that I will not die?" "It is a left-handed fortune. I know what I have told you, and no more." She knew more. I saw it in her face. That was the only thing of any importance that occurred to us on the second day. We slept in the open that night. The night was clear and cold, and the sky was hung with stars that seemed so bright and close I felt as if I could have reached out my arm and gathered them like berries. We lay side by side beneath the stars, and Calum McGuinness said, "Death awaits you," she said, "but death does not wait for me. I think mine was the better fortune." "Perhaps." "Ah," he said, "it's all nonsense, old woman talk. It is not truth." I woke in the dawn mist to see a stag watching us curiously. The third day, we crested those mountains and we began to walk downhill. My companion said, "When I was a boy, my father's dirk fell into the cooking fire. I pulled it out, but the metal hilt was as hot as the flames. I did not expect this, but I would not let the dirk go. I carried it away from the fire and plunged the sword into the water. It made steam. I remember that. My palm was burned, and my hand curled as if it was meant to carry a sword until the end of time." I said, "You with your hand, me only a little man. It's fine heroes we are who seek our fortunes on the misty isle." He barked a laugh, short and without humor. "Fine heroes," was all he said. The rain began to fall then and did not stop falling. That night we passed a small croft house. There was a trickle of smoke from its chimney, and we called out for the owner, but there was no response. I pushed open the door and called again. The place was dark, but I could smell tallow, as if a candle had been burning and had recently been snuffed. "No one at home," said Calum, but I shook my head and walked forward, then leaned my head down into the darkness beneath the bed. "Would you care to come out?" I asked, "for we are travelers seeking warmth and shelter and hospitality. We would share with you our oats and our salt and our whiskey, and we would not harm you." At first the woman, hidden beneath the bed, said nothing, and then she said, "My husband is away in the hills. He told me to hide myself away if the strangers come, for fear of what they might do to me." I said, "I am but a little man, good lady, no bigger than a child. You could send me flying with a blow. My companion is a full-sized man, but I do swear we shall do nothing to you save partake of your hospitality and dry ourselves. Please, do come out." All covered with dust and spider webs she was when she emerged, but even with her face all begrimed, she was beautiful. Even with her hair all webbed and gray with dust, it was still long and thick and golden red. For a heartbeat she put me in the mind of my daughter. But that my daughter would look a man in the eye, while this one glanced only at the ground fearfully, like something expecting to be beaten. I gave her some of our oats, and Calum produced strips of dried meat from his pocket, and she went out to the field and returned with a pair of scrawny turnips, and she prepared food for the three of us. I ate my fill. She had no appetite. I believe that Calum was still hungry when the meal was done. He poured whiskey for the three of us. She took but a little, and that with water. The rain rattled on the roof of the house, and dripped in the corner, and unwelcoming though it was, I was glad that I was inside. It was then that a man came through the door. He said nothing, only stared at us untrusting, angry. He pulled off his cape of oiled sacking and his hat, and he dropped them on the earth floor. They dripped and puddled. The silence was oppressive. Calum McGuinness said, "Your wife gave us hospitality when we found her. Hard enough so she was in the finding." "We asked for hospitality," I said, "as we ask it of you." The man said nothing, only grunted. In the Highlands, people spend words as if they were golden coins, but the custom is strong there. Strangers who ask for hospitality must be granted it, though you have a blood feud against them and their clan or kind. The woman, little more than a girl she was, while her husband's beard was gray and white, so I wondered if she was his daughter for a moment, but no. There was but one bed, scarcely big enough for the two. The woman went outside into the sheep pen that adjoined the house, and returned with oatcakes and a dried ham she must have hidden there, which she sliced thin and placed on a wooden trencher before the man. Calum poured the man whiskey and said, "We seek the Misty Isle. Do you know if it is there?" The man looked at us. The winds are bitter on the high lands, and they would whip the words from a man's lips. He pursed his mouth, and he said, "Aye, I saw it from the peak this morning. It's there. I cannot say if it will be there tomorrow." We slept on the hard earth floor of that cottage. The fire went out, and there was no warmth from the hearth. The man and his woman slept in their bed behind the curtain. He had his way with her beneath the sheepskin that covered the bed, and before he did that, he beat her for feeding us and letting us in. I heard them and could not stop hearing them, and sleep was hard in the finding that night. All right, so this ends the first part of the story. I'll go ahead and I'll resume with the second part in the next recording. I'm trying to figure out, I'll have to edit this recording, but I can't even get the recording off right now, which, I mean, I can edit it, but it's still kind of weird. Okay, I seriously can't even edit out of it right